The question was, when do you know when to throw away a good idea? I mean, that one's hard. Right? That's the whole trick. I think that, so there was one point that I was actually trying to weave into this talk that I wasn't able to weave in, which is something that I think I've learned later in my life as a programmer and a designer that everyone kind of screws up in the beginning and gets better at later on, which is that I think when you're early in your career, you can start with your tools too much instead of starting with the idea. So you open up Photoshop and design your way out of a problem, or you open up your code editor and start playing around with code, but you don't really know what you want to create. And I think that the concept in throwing Anchor away was that I was really just trying to pick the very best of the ideas and discard everything else that really wasn't going to build to it. And so Anchor wasn't going to build to making Squarespace a better success, so I went with that one. And it's hard, right? I mean, how many people have been designing a presentation? It happened when I was designing this. And you have one slide that's like so good. It's so good. It's like your favorite point. And you keep working on the presentation, and that slide doesn't fit anymore. And you just want to hold on to it, right? You just want it in the presentation, and it just doesn't fit. So if you've got the key goal in mind, whatever that may be, I think that should be used to discard the things around it. What's next for me? Well, what's next for Squarespace is we're a creative tools company. And so I'm lucky enough that we started with just the concept of websites. And then we did many websites. Now we're thinking about the things around websites. And what we think about a lot these days is the concept of ideas growing up. So a website is just a point in time. It came from you having an idea somewhere. It came from you putting that idea together. Then you put that idea on the web. Then there's all kinds of things that happen after that. You want to know how the idea is doing. You want to know your stats. You want to keep in touch with your customers. You want to sell things. So working on that narrative arc inside the company is something that I find really rewarding. And also the next generation of how people will present stories on the web. I think that websites will look very different in a year or two, and we have some really great ideas about what they might look like. Yeah, so the question is, when did I realize that Squarespace was a great idea, and was it ever a bad idea? I think at times it was an unimpressive idea. I mean, I think, I started just trying to build a website for myself. So Squarespace wasn't started because I wanted a business, by the way. I actually was just building a website for myself. And in my dorm in the University of Maryland, a friend actually came in a couple months into it, and I was like showing off and showing him what I made. And he was like, oh, I'll give you $200 for that. That's great. And I'm like, what? It's not worth $200. It's ridiculous. But I was like, huh. Yeah, right. I was like, huh. Other people have this problem. They have the problem that I had. And so it really grew from that. The question is, did I apply lean startup ideas to Squarespace 10 years ago? So I think that book came out 2 or 3 years ago, right? So I'm prehistoric. I think, it's hard for me to answer that because I actually I'm not like super familiar with everything in that book. I think it's like about minimum viable product and stuff like that. Squarespace is not a huge believer in putting out products that are unimpressive. So I think that we actually try really, really hard to make sure that when we do put something out there, while it may be not every feature that we would eventually want on the product, we want those features to be really good and really well thought out so that they're impactful. I think a lot of people go out there with products these days that are a little bit, they're just kind of too addicted to it being too minimal. But it's case by case. So the question is, well, the first concept is that Anchor is a really big idea, one that grew up and was separate from Squarespace. And what's our process in removing things from the product even now when we know something doesn't fit? My answer to that's going to be a lot like my answer to the other thing, which is that if we have a pure kind of goal in mind, we try and discard everything along the way. One of the biggest iterations that happened to Squarespace is between Squarespace 5 and Squarespace 6. They're actually completely separate code bases. A very risky move for a company of any size to basically rewrite their product. I guess this is another big one. That's not a small one. Um, no, I think that, again, when things are not part of the main goal of what you envision the thing to be, it's useful to just put them aside as you move forward. But there's no hard rule, you know. So again, a question around, you know, how we retire features in Squarespace. Generally, what we do, and again, 5 to 6 is an example of this. We let things exist in sort of a legacy mode, and we hide them from new customers. We do. We do with templates, actually. Some of the templates that we had in the store initially are, like, we can't obviously rip it off your website and like take it from you, but you know, we just don't think, we think there's another version of it that's better or more iconic, and so we just phase things out of view. Yeah. Yeah, the question is essentially, how has smartphone usage impacted the initial goal of Squarespace, and you know, how has that changed our lives? We're really lucky in the sense that we built Squarespace 6. We started it 3.5, 4 years ago, which is after the iPhone came out. And so there was never a question when we were building that every single site had to work perfectly on every screen size. So we just started there, as opposed to Squarespace. It was one of the reasons for discarding Squarespace 5, actually, is that wasn't built in a world where the iPhone was even going to come out for another 5 years. And so in a way, Squarespace, in contrast to a lot of other publishing platforms out there, is really a content management system. And you know, if we have your content and it's modeled properly, we don't care if you're viewing it on a phone or a tablet or a computer or in an app or anywhere, really. And you can actually see that embodied with products we have, like the Squarespace Portfolio app, which isn't a website at all. It's a native app. And it syncs with all of your Squarespace content once it's on our site. So you know, in a way, the whole mobile thing and responsive thing has helped us, because we spend an unbelievable amount of money on every one of those themes in the form of people's time and expertise. And because we have such a large developer base, we can make each one of those really, really good, as opposed to, you know, and there's only 25 of them, as opposed to if we had hundreds of them and, you know, we couldn't get it right. So yeah, when it was created, our focus, content management system, and hugely engineering-led company mean that it's been good for us. What is my recovery process after giving up a great idea? Back to the first slide. I'm at the bar in Brooklyn now. I think it's usually very liberating, actually. It feels very good in a way to kind of close the chapter on something, and it just frees your mind to do so many other things. I think too often people try and leave too many doors open at once in their life, and they're just afraid of closing. They're afraid of losing optionality. There's a great, I forget if she's speaking at a conference. I don't think it's a commencement address, but it's an Ariana Huffington thing, of all people. But she's talking about going on a ski trip. She's talking about going on ski trips. And she's talking about how, you know, at some point in her life, she was like, I am never going to learn how to ski ever. And I'm sick of feeling guilty about this. So I'm going to go on your trip with you guys, and I'm never doing that. And I'm just going to chill out and have a drink and sit in the lodge, and I love this. And it's like, it's that feeling she's getting to there where it's like, no, I'm closing that door. That door's done. It's a good one, but it's not for me. I'm done. So it should feel liberating. Thanks, guys.
Wow, thank you so much, Anthony. I am actually really speechless in how much thought you gave the theme. I wish every speaker would do it this thoroughly. Do you agree? Right? Can we give him another round of applause?